Hey, it's Joyce. Thank you for welcoming me here today. In my earlier investigations for videos about abandoned Black cemeteries in Jacksonville, I was led to several historic Black neighborhoods. One actually was a freedman city that was eventually incorporated into Jacksonville, La Villa, named after the plantation that had previously been there. Known as the Harlem of the South, or actually those that say that Harlem was the La Villa of the North. This section of West Jacksonville was a train hub for the South, technological industrial hub, music and theater mecca, and because of all those elements, a fabulously notorious red light district rivaling Storyville in New Orleans. The grande dame of the finest brothel in La Villa was the common law wife of author Stephen Crane, businesswoman, property owner, and New York publishing house author Cora Crane. Today, I will share with you some of the things I've learned about Cora. Cora Ethel Eaton Howarth was born in Boston, July 12, 1868, to portrait painter John Howarth and Elizabeth Holder. The family moved to San Francisco in 1870 when Cora was 5. She was educated well in a cultivated manner to live a life of commerce and independence, not common for women at the times. Early, her writing garnered recognition for both short story and reporting. In 1885, at age 17, Cora met Jerome Silvers, heir to a carriage manufacturing company, and became his mistress. In 1886, Cora moved to New York City, where she married her first husband, Thomas Vinton Murphy, and she admits this was done primarily to get around the culture of the day, requiring single women to be chaperoned about the city. Her husband Thomas was the son of the former collector for the Port of New York and New York State Senator. This offered them endless connections for business opportunities. Thomas and Cora began running munitions and operating gambling houses. They had a very short marriage. Apparently, the divorce was based on infidelity. In 1889, 2 years later, she married Captain Donald William Stewart, son of Sir Donald Martin Stewart, Royal Commander of the Chief of India for Queen Victoria. She moved with him to England and quickly became what was known as an empire widow on their country estate. When the captain was assigned to India, she chose to stay. She didn't want to be a governor's wife in India. Missing the city life, she rented a flat to enjoy the social life in London. During this time, Cora began an affair with the heir to the Chase Bank fortune, Furniss Thompson. This didn't end well, and she moved to bustling Jacksonville. Captain Stewart was understandably furious with Cora for her infidelity, making the point that he had already married below his station, and she was simply proving her lack of integrity through this immorality. He filed divorce papers, but they were never finalized. In 1892, Cora was back in New York City in a townhouse owned by Thompson. She was traveling exclusively with him, introducing herself as Lady Stuart. When she learned of his infidelity with an actress, she stabbed him in a jealous rage, we are told, and headed back to Jacksonville. Calling herself Cora Taylor, she started over in 1885, purchasing the Hotel de Drem. She transformed Hotel de Drem into a nightclub and reopened it as Hotel de Dream. Here, this pleasure resort, as it was referred, allowed a gentleman to meet and mingle with ladies for hire, to then take them elsewhere to complete their business transactions. The present corner of Southwest Ashley and Hawk, now Jefferson, held the Hotel de Dream within La Villa. Author Stephen Crane met Cora in 1896 while enjoying the entertainment in the Hotel de Dream. Stephen was en route to Cuba to cover the Spanish-American War. He stayed in the luxurious St. James Hotel, which was destroyed in the 1901 fire, rebuilt by Clutho, and is now City Hall. I have done a video about Clutho, considered the Frank Lloyd Wright of the South, the man who is attributed with rebuilding Jacksonville after the fire. Many of his buildings still stand. City Hall, the old St. James Hotel, is one of them. Stephen and Cora remained together until his death from tuberculosis in 1900. A horrible accident occurred, resulting in Stephen's ship to Cuba sinking shortly after his departure. Cora brought him to her home, nursed him back to health. Stephen recounts this horrible journey in his book, The Open Boat. In 1897, Stephen accepted assignment to cover the Greco-Turkish War and helped get Cora's writings into the correct editor's hands, which resulted in her being hired to accompany him for the New York Press under a nom de plume, Imogene Carter. Some attribute Cora as being the first American foreign correspondent, but a few minutes of research indicates otherwise. First or otherwise, this was a considerable accomplishment for a woman in Victoria times. I'll simply leave it at that. Cora never legally divorced Captain Stewart, making her all the more notorious to those who concerned themselves with such things. Cora closed and sold the Hotel de Dream and moved with Stephen to Greece. The Cranes remained in Europe until 1900, renting a London estate, Breed Place, a country estate rental. Stephen passed away in a German artisanal water health resort, suffering from tuberculosis. Cora stayed at Breed Place. During this European habitation, Cora came to know the authors H.G. Wells, Henry James, and Joseph Conrad, all three of whom became very good friends during her mourning Stephen, but also helping as they could to forward her literary career. In 1898-99, Cora became involved in a scandal involving an American author and New York Times journalist, Harold Frederick, and his mistress. Married with 5 children, Harold Frederick built a second family with Kate Lyon in London, maintaining her household and her 3 children. Harold died of a stroke in 1898. His wife had Lyon arrested and jailed for manslaughter. Lynn, you see, was a Christian Scientist and called in a science healer for Frederick after his stroke. With a book set for publication called The Marketplace in 1899, this eventual posthumous bestseller became a considerable issue for royalties in inheritance. Victorian society took arms in its support for Grace Frederick, organizing press campaigns to raise money for she and her 5 children. Cora cared for Lynn's 3 children during her incarceration at her home at Breed Place. She too organized campaigns to raise money for them. Cora and Stephen lived comfortably, but not wealthy. It is said that they entertained considerably beyond their means. Joseph Conrad spoke of this issue, referring to Cora as, quote, the only Christian in sight, close quote, during this very difficult time. As his health continued to deteriorate, Stephen interred at the Baden-Willer Germany Health Resort Spa in the Black Forest. Stephen Crane transitioned on June 5th, 1900, at 28 of tuberculosis. He left everything to Cora. Even though she never formally divorced Stuart, her status as Crane's common-law wife was recognized for this transaction of his estate. She arranged for the shipment of his body for burial in New Jersey, Evergreen Cemetery, in Hillside, Union County, New Jersey, the place of his birth. Interestingly, Cora is also buried in a cemetery named Evergreen, but in Jacksonville. While still in their rented English countryside estate, Breed Place in Sussex, Cora sought advice from her literary friend, Joseph Conrad, for leadership to pursue a full-time literary career. Although Stephen left all of his worldly possessions to Cora, she was excluded from all royalties from his work. Realizing she had to once again start over, she decided to move back to Jacksonville, which was being rebuilt after the 1901 fire. La Villa was not burned. The entire Ward Street Bordello district was not only spared, it was booming like never before. She built what became the premier bordello in the entire city of Jacksonville, the Court, at the southwest corner of what is now Houston and Davis. What was left of Stephen's estate covered this investment in a 2-story brick, 14-bedroom ballroom, kitchens, dining room, and annex to 8 more bedroom palace. Shortly after, she expanded to several other resorts and bars, both in La Villa and out at Pablo Beach, now known as Jacksonville Beach or Jack's Beach, her beachside Palmetto Lodge, sitting at the corner of 9th Avenue North and 1st Street. Her success was well noted by other bordello bar and lounge owners who solicited her partnership. In 1905, Cora hastily married Hammond McNeil, son of a wealthy South Carolina family and manager of the Annex in the Everett Hotel, a bar she, in partnership, had made quite successful. This was husband number 4 for anyone who's counting. He was much younger, 25 to her 37. Cora always went for younger men. He became suspicious of her, perhaps rightly so, giving her sovereignty and confidence at the time, and he started following her. At a public picnic, he approached his wife, chatting with a gentleman he didn't know, called him out, shot, and killed him. The all-male jury acquitted him for his husband's rights in protecting his wife's dignity. She divorced him as soon as the trial ended. The murdered gentleman was buried on Cora's dime, also at Evergreen Cemetery, where she rests today. Columbia University purchased most of Stephen's writing from Cora's estate, forming one of the largest bodies of his work, known as the Cora collection. After this brouhaha, Cora really nestled into what people called her bohemian phase, enjoying her beach life and community. She remained an active contributor to both Harper's Weekly, edited at the time by the iconic H.L. Mencken, and Smart Set, a jazz age heyday periodical. Cora suffered a stroke in 1910 at age 45. Recovering from this, heat stroke ultimately ended her life shortly after, from helping push a car out of soft beach sand. Cora returned to her Pablo Beach or Jacksonville Beach or Jack's Beach home and died that evening, September 5th, 1910. Cora is buried in the CW section at Evergreen Cemetery, which rests in the north section of Jacksonville, near the several spots she had purchased for brothel workers who had committed suicide, as well as the man, lover or otherwise, we'll never really know, who was murdered by her last husband. Back in La Villa, other women brothel owners were expanding their holdings also to include more reputable hotels and restaurants on Ashley and Broad Streets. La Villa thrived, in large part due to the fact that by 1905, every train that came to Florida passed through Flagler's Terminal, blocks away, the largest railroad terminal in the South at the time. The line, as it was known, ran the stretches around the hub of Houston and Davis Streets, including over 60 brothels, all women-owned, booming till 1913. The mayoral election of 1913 brought some key topics to the forefront. Democrat reformer candidate Van Swearington ran on the platform of shutting down the sporting houses, as they were called, and forcing out the movie industry. Van Swearington was well known in Jacksonville by his mayoral run, having been in private practice for years and serving as a municipal court judge seat from 1911 on. Further detailed in my earlier video concerning the rebuilt architect Clutho, Jacksonville in these early years rivaled Los Angeles as a silent film mecca. Unfortunately, as all too frequent in situations where money and creativity are pouring in, blind eyes were turned in a laissez-faire attitude for too long to these raucous artists, running amok all hours into the night, drinking, singing, playing music all over town, shutting down streets at will for filming, taking over waterways for same, and even setting off fire alarms simply to film the fire trucks for future footage. The residents of Jacksonville reached a breaking point. They'd had enough. Van Swearington promised to shut down the sporting houses, keep kids out of pool halls, and evict the movie business. And he accomplished all three for a short time. The bordello culture issue was brought to a head when a police officer, Henry Rayleigh, was ambushed and shot by drunken revelers as he attempted to arrest one of their friends for public drunkenness. This created a fury in the city of Jacksonville. The brothel business was not limited to La Villa at the time, though was in most part around Flagler's railroad terminal for obvious reasons. Swearington hired a posse of undercover police to venture into questionable bar and hotels around the La Villa area to find hidden bordellos and working girls. Though the Moral Collective appreciated the cleaner, quieter Jacksonville, the fiscal impact of shutting down the bordellos impacted a startling city coffer loss. Money from travelers and servicemen between the rail station and La Villa was immediately felt, conspicuous in its absence. No sooner had the moral cleanup been accomplished than other downtown businesses began raising a loud and powerful complaint. Previous mayor J.E.T. Bowden was urged out of retirement to bring a contained brothel culture and the money that it brought to the whole city back to Jacksonville. The 1915 mayor race set records. The park in front of City Hall, Hemmings Park, saw 15,000 people gathered to hear Bowden's speech. Acrobats rode bikes and danced across a cable run between the two tallest buildings in the South at the time. Prostitutes wearing red stockings rode on horseback carrying red lanterns around the periphery of the park. J.E.T. Bowden held the illustrious honor of being the mayor during the 1901 fire, where 90% of the downtown was destroyed. 2,368 buildings. He was the Rudy Giuliani of his time. A business-minded leader, even at that time, was accused of sending water and firemen to the line to protect the bordellos as the rest of the city burned. This, in spite of geography, created a fire break. McCoy Creek created a fire break between the fire and the La Villa side of things, just as Hogan Creek had saved the neighborhood of Springfield for the same reason. Swearington's first acts of moral reform were confiscating paintings and sculpture of naked women from pool halls and all hotels and bars. His promise to close all bordellos by June of 1914 was spearheaded by his own Stasi fleet. 3 months into this assault, Bowden threw his hat back in the ring, vowing to return to a business model, bringing back the brothel culture while containing it exclusively into La Villa as a reasonable compromise. Not always considered was the impact this left on the Chinese community in La Villa, which housed 67% of the Chinese population of the day in 1910 in Jacksonville. This was the laundry hub. This community was discriminated against as much as the blacks. Their businesses suffered tragically with the shutdown of the bordellos and reining in of the bar and club culture. Bowden offered promise to this community as well. La Villa became the red light district in 1887 when then Mayor John Q. Burnbridge ran all of the prostitutes over the city line. Later that year, however, the city of Jacksonville annexed La Villa along with several other areas. There are many reasons for this. Some of them had to do with yellow fever. Some of them had to do with the upcoming legislation to essentially enact Jim Crow, but that's another video. Anyway, after Jacksonville annexed La Villa, they ended up bringing the centralized red light district back into the city limits. Oops! Bowdoin won the election handily. La Villa was back in business. Van Swearingen went on to win election as Florida's Attorney General from 1917 to 1921, running on the Prohibition Party to assist the new governor, Katz, in shutting down the rum running. Reformers just can't control themselves. He is attributed with establishing an extensive spy network to combat the Cuban and Bahamian runners. Interestingly enough, one of the three grand dames of the brothels was the House of Spanish Marie, where the prohibitionist Carrie Nation took to one of her axe encounters, coming in with a group of people swinging axes, breaking up bars and breaking liquor bottles. A fairly noted encounter occurred in the House of Spanish Marie with the owner and Carrie Nation, who was beaten up and run off the premises.
Near the end of his seat, the Ocoee Massacre rocked the state of Florida. 56 people were lynched. An entire city burned to the ground. Van Swearingen, friend of the Klan, never lifted a finger to lead to justice for these murdered people. This sealed his political fate. He lost his run for governor in 1920. Freemason, Shriner, Oddfellow, Knight of Pythias, member of the notoriously ominous Masonic Hall on Hogan Creek, which still stands. If you are unfamiliar with the Ocoee Massacre, I did a video about that and other similar mass lynchings in Florida, referred to as Florida's strange fruit.